You're listening to Mike Adams and Chris Savory, the record collectors from the BBC.
On BBC Local Radio in Shropshire, North Staffordshire, South Cheshire and the West Midlands, we present Mike Adams and Chris Savory, the record collectors, from now until 9 tonight.
With you in the Midlands, BBC Radio.
And it's a very warm welcome to Sir Cliff Richard, who, if I may say so, Sir Cliff, you've recently been on a sabbatical.
Well, the sabbatical certainly helped, yeah. There's nothing like having a year off. I would suggest to anybody that employs anybody that they should give all their employers at least a year off. No. Perhaps 2 years.
Of course, Sir Cliff, you've been involved with rock and roll from the very beginning. I mean, and a new tour.
When I started, rock and roll was in its infancy, so
Yes.
really none of us knew how long it would last, if it would last at all. And so therefore, with every decade that went by, you were suddenly aware that you were part of something that you hadn't planned. And we just wanted to do our own thing at the time, not knowing where it would lead. But yeah, it's very satisfying, to be honest with you, that fans are prepared to queue up in bad weather and buy tickets, and my tour is sold out. So it's a big thrill for me.
What I'd like to ask you, Cliff, is Millennium Prayer. And, of course, a massive hit. Any views about that record? Because it didn't get a lot of airplay.
Yes, I'm still confused as to why people chose that one to hate so much and not, to ban. I really can't figure that one out at all, because it had a role to play. I thought there'd be a lot of other millennium-type themes, but there wasn't one. And maybe people were just a bit knocked that I'd got the idea and done it. So I was satisfied that it made it to number one and that it sold all those records, but I'd rather have had the airplay. I don't need that sort of satisfaction. It's the wrong kind of satisfaction. It would have been just as satisfying to have thought, they're playing a record, it's a good record. It wouldn't be a number one if it wasn't a good record. And it was for charity, and it cost twice as much as any other single at the time. So there are no arguments really against it, and I can't understand why it created that furore amongst radio programmers and things, because it was never meant to be a kind of. I didn't do it to sort of be controversial. It was just, I thought, a really nice idea where everyone could sing a lyric that everyone respects, whether you be, regardless of your religious persuasion or not even having a religion at all. It was still a harmless thing to have done, to suggest that we could find a strength from outside us that would forgive us and keep us fed and keep us happy on the planet.
Well, it could just be sour grapes. I mean, but Millennium Prayer certainly was sold hundreds of thousands of copies, Sir Cliff, despite the lack of airplay. Can I just return to your sort of year off, the sabbatical? Can you tell me a little bit about it?
I was never thinking, I've got to sing tonight. What I did was I woke up 2 or 3 times, actually. When you wake up and you swallow and there's that kind of razor blade roughness in your throat. Now, when you're on tour, of course, your heart sinks. You're immediately phoning doctors, you're dosing yourself up with all sorts of stuff, antibiotics and anything to get rid of it, just to be able to get to sing that night. And when I had my year off, I woke up 3 times, as I say, and on every occasion, I swallowed and thought, razor blades, who cares? And I didn't care, because there was nothing to do. I didn't have any work to do. I wasn't going to let anybody down. I didn't have to cancel anything. And the funny thing is that within 4 days, that throat disappeared. And that's because you're resting it, and I learned a lot that, in fact, I don't think the public realize the kind of stress. When we talk about stress, everyone thinks that because you're rich and famous, you seem to be devoid of humanity and all the things that hits humanity. Nothing changes anything. If you get a bad throat and you've got a tour stretching ahead of you and thousands of people to be responsible to, I cannot explain what it's like, except to tell you that when I had my year off, I felt so free. And most of the time I'm thinking, I'm not going to let anybody down because I'm not booked to do anything.
No.
And I had the most stress-free year of my whole career, and I didn't realize just how much we are stressed. Now, unless you've been through that, it's really hard to explain what it does to you. But the year off meant that whatever happened to me, I didn't have to worry about it. So I enjoyed the year thoroughly, and it was a very good time for me to think through how and what I was going to do for the future.
Well, you've got lots of fans, big fans of your music on the Record Collectors Show, and we featured your music many times. I think one of the questions that sort of cropped up over the last year or so from Shadows fans, we've got Shadows fans actually in the studio here, and Cliff fans listening to us, is, were you going to retire altogether?
Well, I mean, I guess that would cross a fan's mind. It would happen to any artist. The group of people that follow an artist are going to think, oh dear, does this mean he's going to stop forever? But I did need the time to myself again. I got away from it. I left England for a number of occasions during that year and went off on my own quite often, made new friends, and had time to think about what I wanted to do, because the whole business of the Millennium Prayer had taken me to a pitch that I've never been to before. I'd never felt such animosity about a record before. I'm thinking, why am I doing this? Why? Rock and roll and radio have always gone together. You know, in the old days, we'd make a record and it would be played. And if it was a hit, they'd play it more. If it was a big hit, they'd keep playing it. And if it died, they dumped it, which seems about the most sensible, logical thing to do. And now that seems to have changed. And for some reason, people have decided there are certain artists they just don't play. And I'm thinking, oh, well, what is the point of making records then if no one's going to play it? So we've got to find now another way of selling our records, because I believe that people like myself still make good records. We make pop records. And it doesn't matter whether you're Will Young or Gareth Gates. We're all of the same ilk. The only thing they have that I don't have is youth. And that doesn't mean anything anymore. I mean, does anybody really care? If you buy a record, do you really care whether the person's 16 or 60? I don't think so. And all you really care about is that you like the record. And if you don't like it, well, you wouldn't buy it anyway, would you? I wouldn't.
Brian Bennett came on the show a few weeks ago, and we featured the Live at the ABC Kingston CD, which was incredibly well received. But the current album, Wanted, how were those songs selected?
Well, they are songs I feel I've missed. In fact, I did a TV show based on the album called The Hits I Missed.
That's right.
And I was just trying to explain what happened in those years, and these are the songs that meant a great deal at certain times through rock pop history, and,
Yes.
and they meant a great deal to me. And so I chose songs that I have always wanted to sing, and that's where the title really came from the album. And Alan Tarney and I both chose them together, in fact. I went with a list of stuff that I thought I'd like to do, and he came up with stuff saying, what about this, what about that? The Searchers record, Every Time You Walk in the Room, was Alan's idea. And I went, oh, yes, because I can't draw out every record that I've ever loved in my life. When people say to me, what's your favorite record all time? I feel like saying, give me 10 years. I need to research this, because there have been so many great records. But when we played the track, we in fact played Jackie DeShannon's version of it. The Searchers had such a distinctive sound. We've used that riff, but Alan changed it, made it more contemporary. And by not listening too much to how Jackie or the Searchers had done it, I just sang it the way I think I would have done it, which is pretty close to both of theirs. But it's a great track, always will be a great song.
One of my favourite records you ever did was Devil Woman, and it's just you added a certain sort of feel to it.
She's just a devil woman.
I never thought I'd get so Cliff to sing that for me. The other thing, obviously, we both share a love of Elvis Presley's music, and I know that a lot of your material has the feel of Elvis about it, and certainly the early stuff. Have you ever considered an early, doing early Elvis Sun material?
I mean, I used to do That's All Right, Mama, That's All Right for You, all those.
Yes.
And I like songs like I Want You, I Need You, I Love You. Now, I don't think it was a single, but I think it was definitely an album track and probably a B-side somewhere. But that would be a great one. Now I've mentioned it, I must put that up for auction and see whether anybody else likes the idea.
Yeah, I think I would like to hear that one. That's a very early Elvis Presley track from the 50s. Moving on, Cliff, I want to come back to the Live at the ABC Kingston. But like many people, I actually enjoyed and watched Robbie Williams, who's from our part of the world, actually, certainly from Staffordshire anyway, appearing at the Albert Hall.
Well, he beat me to it because the Albert Halls, which I started doing about 3 years ago,
Yes.
were a build-up to a project I was planning on. I'd sung, some years back, I had sung a song called Every Time We Say Goodbye, I Die a Little. And I got great reaction from my fans, but also from people who came and said, "Oh, we didn't know you could sing songs like that. You should do more of them." And when I signed my new contract with Papillon Records, they were heavily into me doing projects. Like Wanted is a project.
Yes.
It's not a brand new studio album. It's a project which is taking old songs and making them yours. And I suggested doing a project of taking standard songs, giving them my vocal pop treatment, but perhaps with a more standardized backing. And so I started building up the repertoire. In fact, on that tour, I'd got to sing 9 of the album songs. Now, Robbie did his, and I'm thinking, well, I had the idea first, Robbie, but you got out with it first, and so therefore you're the winner past the post. And I'm not going to have anybody say that I've followed you, so I'm not doing it. But I'll do it sometime in the future. And again, this other bonus track is I thought it would be good to put it on the single just as a taster to show that there is a world of music out there that even some of my fans won't have heard of. And lots of new people won't ever have heard of. And they are just classic, fabulous pieces of material.
Well, of course, that isn't your first live album, Cliff. I mean, the first album you did was simply called Cliff. The second one, which didn't get released, would be the one we've just mentioned, live at the ABC Kingston.
Yes, absolutely. I said to Hank, Hank was in town just recently. In fact, he's on tour. Was on tour, and so I said to him, "You know this album's out, don't you?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Do you realize how good we were?" He said, "Do you know, when he heard it, we both had the same reaction. When they suggested releasing this album, I said, please let me hear it, because we were really crap sometimes." And we played the album, and I thought, I don't understand this. I sing in tune all the way through. And this may surprise you, but sometimes we don't, when you're live. You just don't. You can't. It's hard to sustain that. The public may not notice it, but we feel it. I do sing it in tune, and the shadows are brilliant. And all our chat. The only thing that I would say is strange when you hear this, those of you who haven't heard that period of time, my speaking voice there's something wrong with it. I don't know what I sound like a cross between Elvis, Elton John. I mean, I don't know where I was with my accent. And I think it's because coming from North London, I probably left school talking a bit like that, a bit Cockney. And I was trying to change it. So there's some very strange accent. I have a very unusual accent, not when I'm singing, but when I'm talking. You don't sing, "What do you want to dance?" You don't. You say, "What do you want to dance?" And it's dance. I know it's slightly northern as well, but you don't sing dance. On the record, I actually speak differently. It looks like I'm attempting to be American more than I am when I'm singing. Wow. But the album surprised me because as I say, I just don't remember the Shadows and I being as accomplished as that. The Shadows' arrangements for the songs is terrific. So if anybody's interested in all that stuff, this is a perfect album to listen to because it was never planned. A couple of guys wrote a book, a diary of all the recording sessions that I and the Shadows ever did.
On the show.
And while they were digging around EMI in the archives, they found this tape. Never before, it was never touched up, it was never released, and they found this unreleased tape. So at this stage of my life, I think it's nice to release that.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. And I'll just tell you, the response we've actually had to that CD has been excellent.
Well, I think it would have been Norrie's idea. We had done my first album ever was live, but it was in a studio.
That's it, yeah.
We invited 200 people to come in, and they set up a stage at one end of Abbey Road Studio 2, which is where I made all my records, or most of them. And I got in there whenever the Beatles went in there. And apparently Paul said to me years and years later, he said, "You never believe it. Whenever we rang up, they said you had it." I said, "No, Paul. When we rang up, they said you had it." And we'd all gone through the same thing. But Studio 2 was soft for both of us. And we had the studio turned into this little theatre and did my first album live. Oh. And it was a big success, of course. Now, I'm sure it would have been Norrie who'd have said, "We'll come out, and when you're doing a genuine live show, I'll come out and record it." And I remember I'd forgotten all about it, I must say, but when they mentioned it, I said, "Oh yeah, the ABC Kingston. I do remember doing something there." And so it was such a shock to hear it all happen on the record. And I do appreciate what you're saying. The Shadows and I, along with Marty and Dickie Pride and stuff, we were, when you think about it, we were so lucky. To begin then and be at the beginning of things means that there wasn't anybody else who could do it. We were the only ones around. We're the ones that kind of helped create European rock and roll.
Yes.
And I'm really glad to have been part of that. But anybody that doesn't know Marty Wilde or Dickie Pride should try and get something because they were really fantastic. Marty was, I think, the best of us all.
Well, also Billy Fury was another great artist, I mean, who you work with as well. Let's just move on a little bit, Cliff. I used to live about literally a short walking distance from the ABC Kingston, so though I didn't go to the concert, I knew it really well. There's a great picture on the back of the CD, which is the van. Tell us a bit about that.
When I look back at it, I can't believe that we didn't set it up.
No.
Because it looks like, you know, I mean, Bruce is looking out. He's looking, got his hand up to the window to try and see the fans. He's smiling. I've got my fingers in my teeth going, oh, God, get us out of here. And in fact, that van is the one that later at the ABC Blackpool, we used to use it to get out. We used to hide ourselves in the backs and go through the fans. The Beatles came and did a Sunday concert. We were doing a season there. The Beatles came and did a Sunday concert, and they used that van. We lent them our Thames Transit to get out, because they had fans screaming for them as well.
I wonder where that van is today. If it was still around, that Thames van, it certainly would be collectible. I mean, I've referred to you as Cliff, as we all love you as Cliff, and of course I refer to you as Sir Cliff. I'd like to ask you about the actual knighting ceremony, Cliff.
Well, it was fantastic, actually. It was a very emotional time. I mean, I'm an old-fashioned monarchist. I like the idea that our country is so different in so many ways, and one of the major ways is that we have a live monarchy that is separate. I think mistakes have been made within the monarchy of trying to be too accessible. I'm almost one of those people that says, no, I'd rather dream about you and fantasize about the life you lead. I don't need to know. I don't need to be able to touch you or anything like that.
No.
And we've kind of still got that. Certainly the Queen, Duke of Edinburgh, the Queen Mother, they've remained not aloof, but certainly separate. And I like that. I know in some countries that the Queen will shop in Tesco's or whatever, and there's nothing wrong with that either, to be honest with you, but I prefer someone else to do the shopping for the Queen. I'd go and do it for her. But so when I got the chance of being, when the letter came to say, would you accept the award if the Queen gave you a knighthood, I wrote back, pen and paper burned. Yes, please, I'd love it. How would you not love it? And I like the idea of having these honours because there's something you can't really, certainly in our industry, you can work for a gold disc. You can work to sell tickets. I didn't do anything to become a knight. Someone else decided, oh, have you noticed Cliff's done a lot of charity work? Let's put his name forward for it. And even then, you don't even know that's happening. And then suddenly you get a letter and suddenly you think, oh. And so it's nice that the country, not just the monarchy, but the country has honoured you because of something they appreciate you doing. And that's the way it works. And so when I went there, it was wonderful. My three sisters came. I could hardly talk, the poor Queen. After she had dubbed me and put the medal around my neck, she doesn't say arise, Sir Cliff, but she's the first one that speaks, that we were told, do not say anything to her until she speaks to you. And I can't, she said something like, it's been a long time coming. And I sort of went, and I'm thinking after I said to my sister, I said, it's ridiculous. She's probably wishing she'd given the thing to a doctor or at least someone who could speak English because I couldn't talk. And I was choked, absolutely choked up.
Can I just say on behalf of all our listeners to Cliff, thank you so very much for the music and the first night of rock and roll. Our special guest tonight on The Record Collectors, Sir Cliff Richard.